Now, Thomas, today is July 13th, 2018, and I didn't see any a series of tweets because, of course, this afternoon, or I don't know what it is in England, what time it is in England, Trump is meeting with the Queen. So you've had time to look at this visit, which includes bilateral discussion with Theresa May, and we'd love to have your insight on what's going on.
Oh, Betsy, I'm excited by that. As a matter of fact, I put a special hat on just for the occasion of talking about the Queen.
Yes, I see that special hat.
We should all dress up in our special crowns so that we all know that we each have a divine connection and we don't need a queen or a king or a monarch to make that. But anyway, I'm real excited about everything that I've seen. Let's. Where do you want to start? You want to start with England?
Yep, we're going to start with Theresa May and what happened there, and then we'll carry it on through to the Queen's visit, and then I want to talk about Putin.
All I can say is that was one chintzy, pathetic presentation that they put on for Trump. He was very nice and all that, but you know, the little presentation of the guys in their funny hats and blah, blah, blah. And no, really, no. Here's what was really happening. Khan, the mayor of London, got squished because he said, he allowed the little balloon, the helium balloon of the mad, angry Trump to be raised in a square where they couldn't even raise a few hundred people to participate, though he told the world over and over again that there have already been 50,000 participants signed up, a week ago. No. And there was as many Trump followers there supporting Trump as there were the anti-Trump. It was completely peaceful, and it looked like a person flying a kite. It looked
probably Barron has bigger birthday balloons than that thing. Okay, but let's get into the meat. Come on, let's get into the meat of what's going on.
No, that was the meat. Khan.
All right, Khan
is the new Muslim mayor of London who Trump has been in a war with, stating that he is responsible for the terror on the streets of London because he promotes it, he encourages it, and he does. Now, Trump didn't say it that blunt, but basically he said it's not safe and this is the fault of the mayor. So they said, no, you can't even fly into London because we're just too scared of the tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people who are going to come out and riot and demonstrate. That was the most peaceful, that's what that square looks like on a normal weekend, okay? There was nothing going on. There was no resistance to Trump in England. Here's the resistance. The resistance is that he said the truth, which he's always said. If you don't have a hard Brexit, it isn't going to work in creating a bilateral agreement and trade with us. What are you thinking? $151 billion in the hole. That's what we pay America, Trump said in his talk in the news conference with Theresa May, the Prime Minister. He said very clearly that he's not going to put up with this. And so if Britain wants to be part of the EU to try to steal $151 billion a year, not pay their NATO bill 2%, not go up, cost of living, cost of war increase, needs to go up to 4%. And by the way, Stoltenberg, the head of the Secretary General of the NATO at breakfast, as we pointed out, offered up, Trump then admitted, $34 billion to be quite specific. But as he said, Stoltenberg, that's just the beginning. No, we have more coming, $266 billion if they all pay what they should have been paying. So if everybody pays their bill, Trump will walk away with at least $266 billion. He's walking away right now with $33 billion that they put on the table to keep him in the game. For him, America, and he is the only person that decides these things. He is the commander-in-chief. He doesn't have to ask anybody's permission. He is, basically now said, okay, y'all anteed up. And at the end, it was a love fest. Okay, cool. We'll go on with NATO because that makes a very strong presentation against Putin, who I'm going to meet in Helsinki very soon. But he brought out at that table what then came out in the conversation with Trump and May. It's kind of a conversation. They were answering questions to the press.
Are we going to talk about the pipelines?
That's what we're talking about.
Oh, okay.
And as we pointed out to you, when Trump exploded them at that breakfast meeting with NATO saying, what the heck is Angela Merkel doing cheating on all of you, bringing in, and now he's mentioned $60, $70 billion worth of oil? I mean, excuse me, 60, 70, 80% of their entire energy usage will be brought in through, and then they named it. He wouldn't name it. He would not name it. Remember when I said, I wish he'd just name it. I'm naming it. It's not Nord Stream 1, it's Nord Stream 2. It must be complete. And when it was complete, it didn't have full sanctions on it from Obama. So they tried to slip under the wire and get Nord Stream 2 coming into the northern part of Germany. And she wasn't going to tell anybody about that. Wasn't going to tell the EU, wasn't going to tell anybody. So he forced Theresa May to basically state, yes, we are all talking about this now. Mr. Trump made us talk about this.
Well, wait just a minute. Now, let me tell you, folks, when Thomas was listening to this video and he heard Theresa May name Nord Stream 2, there was a hallelujah, I told you so.
And there was some throwing of cookies and some grapes and things in the conclave because I was cheering. Because I was so thrilled, and of course other people were going, this is the most boring press conference in the world, and I'm going, shh, be quiet, I have to hear every single word. And Nord Stream 2, she barely mentioned it after he forced her, after 3 or 4 back and forths, to mention, and then the press was trying to get out of her, what is your response to Mr. Trump's allegations that Angela Merkel, the cheating daughter of Soros, might as well be, cheating all of Europe, cheating Germany, cheating the world, and basically making NATO completely moot. Why is there a NATO if you're bringing in all this oil to Germany, the place that, we have more troops than anywhere else in Europe, defending them because, remember, we went to war with them twice. We never went to war with Russia.
How do these other countries feel that they're having to put money in the pot for this when Germany and Russia are doing business with each other?
That was the explosion. That was a drone strike. And that the thing, it was just amazing. He dropped that bomb on Stoltenberg, and nobody else has been able to pick it up. But because he said that the relationships with Britain, with the United Kingdom, are the very most special, or the highest special.
Oh no! He's doing what they do to us. All these years, we were always told the Brits are our friends and how special our relationship is. But that was to keep us from looking that our biggest number one enemy on the face of the earth right now is the United Kingdom. Not you, good people of the United Kingdom, but you know what we're talking about: the Queen, her Privy Council, and all the corruption that spills over to the United States, and Serco, and the election rigging, and that Malik Brown and all that stuff. So what Trump did was the same thing that they do to us. Oh, no, we're friends. We're great friends.
Yes, because they are paying their 2% of NATO, and they are only cheating us in multilateral trade deals through the European Union. So he wants, of course, and he blew them apart with a statement to one of their fake news outlets, I'd call it, because they minced words, they glued together words, they basically just made Trump say what they wanted him to say when he didn't say that, which I'll go over in just a minute. But the point is right now he's not dropping so many tweets because these are drone attacks on these individuals, okay? They either get it together or they're going to have to look Trump straight in the eye. Did you see how the Queen looked when she met Trump?
No, I did not see that.
She acted like she was meeting royalty.
Listen, the reason I didn't see it is because they dropped that darn Rod Rosen special report right then. And that was the whole purpose, to keep me from watching the Queen and Trump.
That was the distractor factor. Rod Rosenstein, the little rat. Well, what am I calling him now? Rat Rod Rosenstein. He is so evil. We'll talk about him and what he had to say as a disruption to the President of America actually getting, I thought she was going to bow when she shook Melania's hand. Honest to God. She might be innocent because she looked at Trump like, I don't know. You're a god.
No, she is not innocent.
I don't know.
She heads that place and she's in charge. She's either doing a good job or a bad job. And if she's doing a bad job, then let Charles take over. Ha, ha, ha.
If she's not in charge, why do people go and bow and kowtow? Here's what I say. Her hat is her crown, and in her purse are her golden shares to the companies that actually control major parts of America and the rest of the world. She carries around her little golden chairs in there, and her 597 Privy Council members make sure everything's tidy. And all she has to do is either nod her head or not nod her head, veto or not veto. Anyway, let's go back. In the meeting in the press conference with Theresa May, he got her to, and the press got her to say, what do you say about Angela Merkel doing this? What do you say about this? What do you say about this? And she basically, because of our very special relationship, which Trump, as you say, made fun of, really, she said, well, yes, the rest of the NATO was very concerned about this issue that Mr. Trump brought. She never said it wasn't true. Matter of fact, she basically endorsed that it was true after all that she said. And he made us think about it and talk about it. And there was some major concern about this tying together. So anyway, going on with my British interpretation of what happened there, Theresa May was then forced to admit, yes, there is a pipeline. And then later she was forced to admit, well, the Nord Stream 2. And she said it so quietly and under her breath, but I cheered and I threw things because I said, I told all of you it was the Nord Stream 2 that was open because the sanctions weren't clear. And Angela just went around those sanctions, which makes her an enemy of America, an enemy of the EU, an enemy of every country that she lied to and stole from. But remember, she worked with Soros to bring the ships over, to pick people up at the shore. They didn't pick them up in boats. That's a lie. They picked them up at the shores of North Africa and Syria and brought them as an invasion to Europe. They could have taken those same ships, which were paid for by Soros, and now we know German taxpayer money, all the way to Hamburg. They could have taken them to where they're bringing in the Nord Stream 2 pipeline from Russia and let them off only in Germany and not destroyed Europe.
She not only allowed an invasion of her country, she orchestrated the invasion of her citizens.
Correct. All based upon George Soros's Open Society Foundation agenda. And she's basically couldn't be any closer to George Soros than his own daughter. Now, when Theresa May had to admit that, then she was in a bad way because the press then started to say they wanted Trump, they wanted her, they all wanted to say the following words: hard Brexit. Nobody would say it. That's what Trump said. He said it before. Well, they're not going to have trade with us if they don't do a hard Brexit. You can't do a soft Brexit, still attempt to do bilateral trade with us when you're still controlled by the EU. No, it's not going to work. Anyone would know that. That's preliminary. You see, they forget the big issues. So when Trump went, before he goes there, he says, sorry, NATO, I might close you down. So he started off with contention in the deal. That's part of doing a deal. And you warned them ahead of time, the worst scenario you're bringing. And he did. They were all terrified. They bowed at his feet. They all promised to pay up. And they bought tons of their own military equipment so they could stop using us as their defenders and our equipment to defend them and not pay for it, though they have an agreement to pay for it. So he ripped them up. And then in Britain, he ripped up Khan. Khan tried to stand against Trump as the entire parliament. And I love it. I love it that they got Trump to say, well, what do you think about Boris Johnson? And Trump said, I like him. We met. We were friends. It's good. But what would you think about him as a prime minister? Oh, yeah, he'd make a fine prime minister. So they take that and they say, Theresa May did not take Trump's advice, and now they're not going to have a trade deal. This is going to end Brexit before it even begins, and Trump wants to support Boris Johnson as the replacement for Theresa May. This is so stupid. That isn't what happened. Listen to the interview like we did. And that came out in a debate between the very people who he interviewed and then were there at that press conference and asked questions. So he got Theresa May to say, didn't I say very nice things about you? How come they didn't print that? And what I said about Boris? No, they asked me if he'd make a good prime minister. I said, yeah, he'd make a fine prime minister. Why would I say otherwise? So here's why he could have said otherwise, because Boris Johnson cussed him out over and over again. So many members of parliament stood up and spent hours cussing out Donald Trump before he was elected that it is ridiculous. They were all in on meddling in the election with political manipulation from overseas, from our supposed very special friends in Britain and the United Kingdom. They were warring against Trump before he even became president. Why would they even be involved in the process? And so they asked Trump, what do you give her as advice for Brexit? He goes, I am not giving any advice. But he said it over and over again. I only ask for one thing, and that's that we have bilateral agreements in trade so that we can continue our long-standing relationship in trade and get out of the EU controlling Britain's trade with America, which is harming Britain. He said if Britain went with what he would call, and no one would name it, a hard Brexit, which means they get control of their country back again immediately and not over years or decades or centuries, that's the way this plan is always going.
He's going to help them, because he's saying you're not going to have trade with the United States unless you have a hard Brexit. And they have to, if they have a hard Brexit, they're going to need some economic stability. So it's a win-win. If they look at it that way, it's a win-win.
He literally said, if you are able to have bilateral trade agreements with us and we drop, the barriers and have free trade and we don't need tariffs, you'd be able to increase by double, triple, perhaps 4 times as much. In other words, he was standing there telling the world that he can increase the United Kingdom's GDP by 200, 300, 400% if they would simply get away from the European Union and go with what Theresa May is recommending, which is what the people wanted when they voted for it. So then he goes and he meets with the Queen. As I said, really pathetic ceremony that they presented to them. I'm sorry.
It? Very.
That was just pathetic.
Pathetic.
Oh, let's go back to the
Maybe
Theresa
the Queen
May
is
thing.
on a budget or something.
Worse than on a budget. Did you see that at Chequers they had flags behind them that the poles didn't even fit in the bases, so they wobbled every time the wind blew? It looked like a bad Boy Scout meeting. Boy Scouts have better flags behind the speakers. And those podiums, where did they get those podiums?
Yes.
Those were the most pathetic excuse for, and did you notice that in front of Trump, it is practically, there is no country in the world that doesn't do this, that the protocol is at the podium that he's standing, the seal in front of him is the seal of the President of the United States, not the seal of Britain, which was on both podiums.
No, because they were sending a little message to Trump. We own you.
That's what they were trying to say. And Trump was saying by the end, does anyone not understand that I have NATO's ass in my hand? I love what you and your team posted, that beautiful cartoon about Angela Merkel and Putin sitting on a pipeline, kissing each other, and Trump standing over there, busting them. That's what's going on. He's going to go to Putin and say, hey, by the way, your pants are down. Pull them up before the press notices. But no, everyone's noticed. So he had NATO in the palm of his hand. He could have squished it out of existence. He didn't. He made it stronger than ever. Why? Because right now he's rebuilding our economy.
Well, they need to be fighting the refugees that are in those countries. That's what NATO needs to be doing.
Well, that's what he said. Get your borders together, European Union.
Yeah, if you're going to spend money defending yourselves, that's what you need to be watching.
And then Theresa May, can I please go into my bad British accent? She said,
but it's so hard for people to understand.
All right, I won't try to get British on you, but she just kissed the feet of every refugee that has ever come in, any asylum seekers, all immigrants. She just bowed down before them. She emptied her pocket of all the money and gave it to them and said, oh, no. Our historic relationship with immigrants is so beautiful, it might as well be heaven.
Okay, well, let's move on now. You were talking about getting ready to go for the Putin meeting.
So pathetic, such a bad joke. So Trump, while he's there, remember, these are the who refused to meet with Trump, who called him every name in the book. The names that were being called Trump in America, they were 100 times worse coming out of the mouth of lords in the British Parliament from their top politicians. Boris Johnson, all of them. And then now what happens? He goes there. He's the hero. He just showed that only Britain is keeping their agreement in NATO. Only 1 out of 29. And then he got NATO together so that Britain, Theresa May said, "Oh no, it's better. It was beautiful. It's better than it's ever been, stronger than it's ever been." And it was a love fest. Yes, Mr. President. Okay, I'll admit it. It was a love fest at the end. Yes, NATO's better than ever before. Okay, first thing he did. Second thing, he goes to Britain and he's now accepted. Accepted by the Queen for tea. Okay, you know what that means? That means that the entire rejection of Trump has to be over because the Queen, in her divine wisdom, has accepted Trump. And they blocked out the moment because they knew that the Queen is daft. She's daft at this point. Take a look at her. Anyway, they knew she was daft, and she looked like Hillary Clinton having one of her seizures, looking up at the balloons. And that's exactly what she looked like, practically. I've never seen her glow in all these years of my life of knowing Queen Elizabeth, Queen Lizzie. I have never seen her smile a more radiant smile than when she shook the hand of Donald Trump and Melania Trump. It was beautiful, but it was in a pathetic tent that the Boy Scouts have better versions of, in her hideaway palace, to make sure that the people of London couldn't really greet Trump. No one could really greet Trump. And then they complained because he came not only in the Beast, but he had mega beasts. He had these things we've never even seen before with a 360-degree whatever, and probably drones flying above. I'm sure those were drone communication devices for full spectrum. He could have overthrown Britain with just the power he had in his entourage.
That is the point. His presence was felt, because I'm reading in the YouTube comments from our friends in the UK saying, "Oh my goodness, if you could hear the thunder overhead." That was saying the Americans have arrived. Our Donald Trump has arrived.
And let's remember that the G7, they had them sitting at folding tables in a retreat that was so hard for the president to come there, he actually became a target for assassination. This time they did the same thing, but they spread it all over Britain. And so he had to have literally full spectrum warfare protecting him. Why? Because he knows that Britain is not our friend. He knows that Britain is our enemy. He used Cambridge Analytica. Do you think he didn't know who Cambridge Analytica was and who their mother company was? Strategic Communications Laboratories, which works directly out of the Queen's Privy Council. Do you think Trump didn't know that it was the Brits with Stephen Halpern who set him up? He's the one who called out Spygate. He's the one who said, "Oh yeah, you want to call him an informant? No, I call him a spy." Not only that, he's a British citizen as well as an American citizen. And it was all planned by Boris Johnson, by Sir Richard Dearlove, by Geoffrey Patty, by Sir Lord Malloch. Let's just call him Lord Malloch Brown.
People say, you guys don't get the titles right. Oh. And I go, well, we just aren't titled people.
Well, if I told you all my titles, it would take half a day to say them. Okay. That's why I just choose my title.
Okay, let's get to Putin.
Pain in the ass of the globalist, and the Queen is a globalist, and all those people he just met with are globalists, except for, he could have met with Farage. I don't know. I don't think so. There's a few people he might have met with who aren't globalists, but basically, when the Queen blessed him with her radiant smile, I thought for a moment that perhaps the divine right of kings might be correct in that moment, because she blessed him with that beautiful smile. And then she had trouble walking across the yard, even remember where she was going. That's the reason it couldn't be a big ceremony. She can't be let out of a small environment. And then she had tea, and I'm sure they talked about nothing except how beautiful Melania is. When it comes out, if they have tapes, I will lay, I'm going to go 75 cents down on this one, okay? Conclave, 75 cents, that they talked about nothing but Melania and how beautiful she is. And her astounding gown that she had on the night.
Spectacular.
It was a cape. It was a shield. It was, don't even get me. It was a bodice. It was the most elegant thing I think I might have ever seen. And then she goes to the meeting, and this is what Trump pointed out. I love this. He pointed this out like 10 times. There was a reason he pointed this out 10 times. That he has talked to no one there but Theresa May. Because she had breakfast, lunch, and dinner with him, and then breakfast and lunch, and then even that, she was going to arrange what happened next. They separated Melania with Theresa May's husband, and they did some things separately. But it was Theresa May and Trump one-on-one, nonstop. That was so that she would keep her job, because the deal with America is the deal that will make Brexit happen or not, period. So What really happened?
Yeah, I'll tell you what it was. It was like a real version of The Apprentice, as he takes each one of the men to the boardroom and whips them into shape.
That is absolutely correct. And Donald Tusk of the European Union, he fired. And others he promoted, like the Secretary of the of NATO. But what he did with Theresa May was he said, look, you're going to become a Trumpite by the time I'm done with you, because I'm going to show you how it goes. I'm going to show you how to throw this stuff out to your press and beat your press on their own grounds. And that's what he did with holding the entire trip to the United Kingdom was held up by the press conference that he had after the NATO meeting. And why did he have that? So the truth would go out immediately. He didn't have time to tweet all the truth because it was too big. And when you see Pompeo on one side and Bolton on the other side, and their shadow, and Trump in the middle, yeah, that's the good and the evil there. Do they really want to mess with Bolton? Do they really want a bloodthirsty pit bull sicked on them? Or would they rather have a nice, jolly Pompeo who they know is going to say whatever Trump is going to say? So I thought it was beautiful. But he held them all up because of that. And then when he got there, what did he do? Oh, he made sure that he and Theresa May took all the time to spend with that press conference so that the truth would be put out. As you know, that's what leaders do. They state what they agreed upon. Well, they usually only state what was written before they even meet. I hope everyone understands that. Those are not in any way impromptu. Every single word. Oh, nope. Theresa May had to add things because Trump is such a disruptor. And then Trump, of course, as you know, just jumps off and adds whatever he wants. So the meeting then with the Queen, what was that? That was to say, my mother was Scottish, and I'm going to recognize this whole monarchy thing, not really as a monarchy. I'm just going to say that you're a really tremendous woman. He didn't say she was a tremendous queen. He didn't say she was a tremendous partner. He said she was a tremendous woman, and he says the same thing about his mother. So basically, he was just, it was like coming home for him. And then he went and played, he's going to go play some golf, and then he's going to go just beat the snot out of Putin. So Helsinki and Putin, we already told you what's going to happen. He's got more intelligence, and I've told you this every time he meets with Putin. He says, look, the pipeline, dude, the pipelines. Let's talk about reality here. Let's talk about the rat lines of war. Let's talk about Syria. Let's talk about that you want the pipeline coming out of Iran because you kicked Britain and France out. Let's talk about China getting a chunk of Saudi Arabia. And then let's talk about splitting up Qatar, and let's talk about the oil in the Levant. That's what they're going to be talking about. He's going to be talking about the oil. Nord Stream 2 is the one that I mentioned. That is even bigger and brings in three different types, natural gas, liquid gas, and oil. If they open Nord Stream 1, Europe will stop having deficits, and they won't need to vampirize us with a $151 million surplus. What they will do is simply tell the truth and let that energy flow through the top of Germany, and then Germany gets their piece of it. But Germany's using it themselves. They're using it to enrich themselves. That's why they're the richest nation in the European Union. So he's called them out. He's shown that the European Union is completely corrupt he always takes 1 point, 1 or 2 or 3 points, hammers them. And guess what? He always wins. So far, even with the tariff wars, hang on a minute, folks. Be patient. He keeps telling you, we're in a battle for a tariff war with China. We're not going to go $500 billion in the hole every year. I'm sorry. I can't not win. China is at flatline for their own population growth.
We don't want to go down that China route right now.
Yeah, you know how I get worked up about China.
I know. So anything more about Putin, because I want to get into why Rod Rosenstein felt that it was so important to come out and spew his little mealy mouth about 12 Russian hackers and keep me from seeing the Queen's expression when she met Trump.
Well, Rosenstein picked that as a distractor because they always do that. And they release these stupid things. Now, the indictments are true. They made the indictments, but those indictments are false. Those indictments are against people that are just simply picked off of a list from the GRU, basically the NSA of Russia. They didn't do anything. That was done by the Global Engagement Center. We've already told you about the $76 million spent by Strategic Communications Laboratory, who owned Cambridge Analytica at the time. So, what was really happening there? Rod Rosenstein was there because of Peter Strzok's testimony. Now let's remember, everything about what Peter Strzok said was a lie, and the Democrats came to his defense bloodthirsty because they were defending themselves. Each of those people who spoke, we could go back and show how they had a connection to this, and they can't let this happen, okay? And then what I'm going to get into here is absolute insanity with what Rosenstein revealed, but here's what really happened. The initial 12 indictments against Russians coming through Concord Catering Company, Putin's chef, and the other two companies, was taken to court by Concord Catering and beat up. Mueller was so beat up, he had to get 5 more angry Democrats, probably, to join his team. 5 more lawyers joined his team to handle that end, because every time he went to court, he was beat up by these lawyers, made fun of. It made it into the press, and he looked like a complete imbecile. And there's no evidence there. The evidence presented was complete garbage and was actually created by the Global Engagement Center. That's what he released. When he went to court, he released different things. And that was 2.5 million Russian communications that had never been translated. But he says they affected our election, and that his group looked at them and knows what they said, but nobody translated them. And then the lawyers for Concord Catering have said, first off, there's no such charge as conspiracy against the United States. Second off, this investigation has no foundation. Third off, none of those people you've named ever worked for me. Fourth off, you were reading from a New York Times article from an investigator who looked at things that had happened 6 years prior during the Obama administration that you did nothing about because they were laughing at you because they did it and you did nothing, and all they were memes and simple little messages trying to get people to basically go into chaos. That's what the Russian hackers do and the Russian trolls. They just want chaos. That's what most of them want. They don't target specific things. And the $100,000 that was spent is nothing. And so those little things then now have evolved to, instead of a very small group of things that Mark Zuckerberg gave them, 2.5 million Russian communications that haven't been translated. So Mueller has been totally made a joke, and some of those people that he named have showed up in America and showed up around the world and said, I didn't work for that company. I worked then, and we did this, and there was Trump wasn't even involved. We weren't anywhere near the Trump-Clinton election. Period. So it was all disproven. So he had to hire 5 lawyers to handle that side. Now, Rosenstein came out and said, the new 12 Russians we're going after, they are kind of like Russian NSA guys, and we're never going to be able to indict them. And they went in, and what they did is they took the fake allegations that were and stupid things that were made by Comey during the election and immediately after the election, and then as Trump was getting elected, they kept coming out with these ridiculous reports, which I'll go over. We went over them at the time and demonstrated that they were completely bogus. So what has Mueller done now? Instead of going back to, a 6-year-old article from the New York Times and just making up grabbing some Russian names and making up crimes that he couldn't prove, he's now used the following. He says these 12 people were working for the GRU, the Russian NSA, as it were, and that they came into America and they took over American victims' accounts. But the Americans never knew it. And he can't say the name of those Americans because he doesn't want to let the names of the victims out. Matter of fact, he's never contacted any of them. He said in his release, he's never let the victims know that they have been victimized. And these are the same allegations that were made earlier. Now, what's really amazing is those same allegations of Russian collusion and meddling fell flat because they were stupid. When we looked at them, they didn't have anything to do with Trump or supporting Trump against Hillary. They were just general stuff, and they were stupid stuff. So, sorry, they've now merged that together with the following, and this is the beauty of it. This is why it's news. But the reason, just like Peter Strzok, first off, Peter Strzok, or Strzok, if you want to pronounce it properly, but Peter Strzok said that he answered when he was behind closed doors he had a top secret security clearance. Lie. It was taken from him. He was only given a temporary truncated clearance for the testimony so that he could then take the advice of FBI lawyers, which is completely illegal and stupid, seeing that he's been sanctioned, disgraced, knocked off a committee for bias, proven to have bias.
Listen, the FBI has its attorney there to protect the FBI, not Peter Strzok.
That's right. And Peter Strzok admitted that he is the one who worked out a deal with Michael Horowitz to choose exactly which of his communications, the texts between he and Lisa, would be released. Imagine that. Of the 55,000, the ones he chose were the least damnable. They were the nicest ones, so he wouldn't get in trouble. And they were completely redacted, removed of all senior executive service member names, all attachments, and all references to anything personal between him and Lisa.
But wait a minute. I thought it was just all this personal stuff. Why in the world would senior executive service names be removed?
Because no one wants to say that Andrew McCabe... nobody wants to list. I can make the list. Nobody wants to make the list of senior executive service members because they're all the top corrupt people. We're only dealing with probably 3-4 dozen people who were part of this conspiracy. They're all at the top, and almost every one of them is a senior executive service member, working out of basically a secret paramilitary cabal that controls the government, whether Republicans or Democrats are in that White House. It doesn't matter. So that's why it had to be removed. So dig this. He said both behind closed doors, and then it was beautiful because when he came out in public, he showed himself to be a demon, a vicious, mean, awful person who lies. He shows that he's working directly with the corrupt FBI and the corrupt FBI lawyers, that he's obfuscating, that he's committed perjury right there in front of all of us. He's lied. He lied about many points. Gowdy and Jim Jordan and Matt Gaetz have pointed these things out, that he lied. He's perjured himself. He has to come back and testify again if we want to take this anywhere further. Plus, those lies cause it that he can be arrested for that, okay? Not only that, why is he still even working for the FBI? And Lisa Page refused to come under a subpoena. She's not working for the FBI. She quit so she wouldn't have to answer Michael Horowitz's questions. And I said this all along, and this is proof of it. Peter Strzok had an agreement with Michael Horowitz that he would only release the exact things that he wanted, and now he said he could. He agreed.
That Strzok wanted, or that Horowitz
wanted? That Strzok wanted.
Okay.
So when Horowitz said he found the missing text, that's a lie. When he said that we can't find some of the 55,000, that's a lie. When he said that he's the one who found the missing ones that the FBI and DOJ couldn't find, that's a lie. When he said he's the one who actually, brought them forth and it was his work, that's a lie. Peter Strzok said he's the guy in charge of everything. And by the way, every time he said Clinton investigation, that's a perjury. There was no investigation. Never was. Hillary was not investigated. She was not a person of interest. There was no investigation. It was a cover-up. It was a matter. And that goes to the perjury of Loretta Lynch, the perjury of James Comey, of Andrew McCabe, of William Priestap. Anyone who ever said an investigation on Hillary happened perjured themselves. Anyone who ever said that, and he said it over and over and over again, he was the person in charge of the Crossfire Hurricane investigation. It was not an investigation. It was an FBI counterintelligence operation. It was an attack upon Clinton's attack upon candidate Trump. And we now know because Peter Strzok said that he got the dossier straight from William Orr. But William Orr is still working.
Bruce Orr.
Bruce Orr. He hasn't been fired. He's one of the 500 DOJs at the highest level of the SES. And so now you have Peter Strzok, who was told from the beginning he was going to be the fall guy. And he said, I don't care. I can do all of this. And so he went after and saved Clinton. He went after, saved Clinton again with the server. He went after Clinton and saved her with the Huma Abedin and hiding that with Andrew McCabe because that was part of Crossfire Hurricane. And that's the reason they are going to say the FBI won't allow you to talk about this. The lawyers won't allow because they're going to say, as I said from the beginning, national security issue because it was an FBI counterintelligence operation, which you can hide everything. And you always use the first lieutenant, not the boss. He's the first lieutenant. He was under Bill Priestap. Everything he said was a lie. He doesn't have a security clearance. He has a temporary one.
Well, I see it so clearly, Thomas. This was an attempted overthrow of the United States of America and its president by the senior executive service operatives. Why can't we get the military to go in and extract these domestic enemies? We have their names. We know their deeds. We have them connected in the plum book. Why can't we get rid of them?
Because, as you know, with a federal case, it can take years for the simplest thing to come out.
Well, I think this is... why would we want to use their corrupt courts?
Well, right now, we have to bring it to light so that, for instance, Trump, just like he did when he went to Europe with NATO, as he did with Britain, as he's doing with Russia, as he did with Saudi Arabia, as he did with every company he's gone to, he calls them out to the light, and then their evil is shown, and then it's easier for him to say, now I'm going to stop that evil. And that's what's going on. He's simply calling them into the light, and it's slow. Like he said, where's Jeff Sessions? Why didn't Jeff Sessions do something about the fact that Lisa Page refused to come on a subpoena to a congressional hearing? They wanted the two of them sitting there so that she couldn't defer to FBI lawyers. You see, they would have said, will either one of you please answer this question? And if stupid Strzok wanted to keep saying the same thing, which is basically pleading the fifth, I was instructed by the Mueller investigation, told the FBI that he can't speak. He was kicked off the Mueller investigation, and that special investigation, there is no crime, so it's not an investigation, so they need to stop calling it an investigation. They've already said there's no collusion. Now they're going after the reports they wrote, multiple reports on Russian meddling, which are the weakest, most pathetic thing. Spear phishing that went to the people who run the polls on their private computers. It didn't reach anything. They got a few thousand names out of the Secretary of State in California, and they first started it and said there was 11 spear phishing hacks, then it was 15, then it went to 21. Now they're saying there was 21, and it was these 12 basically Russian spies who did this, and they're going to indict them. But Rosenstein says it's being sent to a special department. That's the DOJ, National Defense Security Department. And what's going to happen there is it's going to die. Nothing will ever happen. It'll never come to court because Mueller was so embarrassed with the previous 12 that he indicted that came out that is now holding his investigation up. He can't close it now because he's committed crimes in his investigation. These 12 are going to go to the deep state, basically trash can. They will never come up again. But at the moment that Trump is being greeted by the Queen, he is saying, we have proven that the DNC was hacked by Russians and that Guccifer 2.0 and that all of the DC leaks were all Russian hacks. That's a lie. They never got the server in their hands. Mueller could not have found that out. That is a pathetic lie. And then all the rest that Rosenstein said was nothing more than talking points to make the FBI look good, using not the people at the top in the SES like himself and his corrupt friends, but always saying, you need to remember that the rest of the FBI, you can't call the rest of the FBI crooks. No, we're calling you crooks.